What up, meatheads? This is Travis, American Butcher, and welcome to the Meat Block Podcast, the weekly podcast by butchers for everyone. And not only was that my father-in-law burping in the background in another room, yes, a new addition to the show alongside Milo. You would think I would get my shit together after 100 episodes. That's right, this is 100 episodes. It's also Thanksgiving. We have a lot to be thankful for here at the Meat Block. Get to more of that later.
Good cutting enhances the quality of good meat. Poor cutting results in an inferior piece of meat, regardless of quality.
Hi, my name's Travis, and I'm with David. David, say hello.
Hey, guys.
And
hey, everybody.
This is the first episode of the Meat Block Podcast. And so, David, what is your vocation? And just start off there and then just ramble.
Just ramble. It's kind of awkward looking back at those first words that I streamed into the ether, wondering if anyone would listen. Just ramble. You think, like I said, I would have a better skill at this. I've certainly become more comfortable doing this, in the sense that I used to cram and have these long, drawn-out notes, and now I just feel like I'm talking. I would like to say that I feel like I'm talking to a friend, but what really makes it go by even better is that I imagine that I'm not talking to anyone, that no one will ever hear this. Then I could truly say whatever I want, or whatever I feel. And it just so happens that I know a lot about meat, so it kind of works in that favor. But I slip into, personal lives. If you've listened to the show, I dabble about my life and Milo and my son and my wife. And I believe there was a series there where I ended each episode just talking about the different process of buying and selling houses and how terrible that whole part was. And speaking of which, here comes, right on cue, hi, Milo. Listening back to the first audio, I just think about where my life was at that point. And just how, a lot of people have feeds online, like a social media feed or things like that. And then you scroll back and you see these old images and these old things that you wrote, a year ago or 2 years ago. And with audio and podcasting, you don't really get that. You listen to it once and then you're done. People genuinely don't go back and re-listen to episodes. Maybe people do. I suggest you do. And if you decide to go back and listen to that first episode, it's just talking about mine and David's journey to become career in whatnot, from cutting to slaughter and all that. But since then, I feel like we've both gotten better at telling stories. Maybe not, but certainly added more about personal details. Back then, it was very mechanical, almost like reading a resume, when now there's reasons why you left this place or where you were in your life. For example, a series of events led me to be in Washington. January 2015, I was running a cut and wrap facility in the beautiful town of San Diego, California. I was still living in West LA, and the commute was pretty significant. It was a company in its infancy, and it was evolving. And anyone who's opened a small business knows how much work and how much money and how much just time and energy goes into growing a business, and how long it takes to make a profit. I was brought on board fairly early. I was brought on board fairly early in the planning stages of this project by a good friend of mine, Melissa Coratina, who is a wonderful butcher, owner of Bavette Meats in LA, and teacher of the Culinary Institute of Los Angeles. I may have, got that wording wrong. And also host of the Heard That podcast. And we knew each other through the person I was dating, who later became my wife. She introduced us, and that's how I got the gig down in San Diego. Now, back with the infancies, the powers at B, where the money comes from, was wanting to see a quicker return on their investment. And by their investment, the Melissa, myself, other staff, equipment, and their numbers weren't as adding up as quickly. You want to watch a bobcat excavator?
Yeah.
Shouldn't she be in bed?
Yeah.
How about you go to bed? Want to say hi to people?
Yeah.
Can you say hi?
Hi.
All right. Good night. Love you.
Bye.
Bye. Future butcher of America right there. Harrison. Danger. Stockstill. So anyway, back to what I was talking about. The numbers weren't adding up, or they weren't getting the return. And when that happens, it's not a hard conclusion to know or realize when you're training yourself, when the growth is like, because when the whole adage, you got to spend money to make money. It's when you want to grow so much in the beginning, it's true. So like, we needed to expand our cooler. We needed to do some things, or we could, instead of spending all that money to make money in a few years, you could just easily cut down on staffing. And knowing how much I was making at the time, and with the plans not to expand at the growth I was hired to do, it was plain to see that my time there wouldn't be, I didn't have longevity. And I could tell that they were like, oh, how could you show him how to do the paperwork? And like, I knew it was like, I'm training myself at a job, but I just didn't care. It was a terrible, stressful time. So I did care. Losing sleep, financial uncertainty is never good. Coincidentally, my wife had a miscarriage the same week they told me they were going to cut my pay. I've never worked at a place that decided to give you less money. I thought when you worked at a place, that what you agree in the beginning is just how it is, but apparently not. So going back to how is this relevant to this episode, this centennial episode of the Meat Block podcast, and the story of how it all became, because me and my wife did want to have a family. And with me suddenly needing steady work, because my wife wasn't working at the time, I was making enough money to support us, because we were in that transitional stage where we were in LA and looking at places to buy in San Diego. But with that, with my vocation not being there anymore and switching, needing a different place to work, and still wanting to have, eventually starting that family, I started looking outside of California, because California is incredibly expensive. Well, the parts of California I want to live. And my wife is from up here in the Pacific Northwest. We came up here for a vacation, and I was eating at a bistro restaurant set in Arlington, Washington. And I was talking to the owners about one of those places where it's like farm to table, etc. And that's where a place like that is just a good launching point. And the owners came out to the table and said, oh, you want to move here? You're thinking about it? Let me give you this number and email for this person who is the agricultural coordinator for Snohomish County. And that name was Linda Knutson. And that was, if there was ever a point in my career where it's just like one contact did everything, or not did everything, but where it's just like, wow, you got this person's contact. This really helped. And I called and talked shop, explained who I was, what I wanted to do in the industry, and that I needed work. And she put me in contact with Island Growers, IGFC. And that's the place that Ryan would eventually working. And then through her, I made the contact to a gentleman named Fred, who was trying to get a mobile poultry unit up and running. And I did some consulting for them. And that was a humbling nightmare that I talked about in our chicken processing episode. And I've talked about it numerous times in other episodes. And he also put me in contact with a ambitious young NFL player, farmer, who wanted to open up a cut and wrap facility that had a mobile slaughter unit attached. And I was hired to design said facility. And I was going to do nothing with the slaughter. I was going to work it until just as they had a slaughter guy who was good. I was better. I had way more experience than him, but it was just, they already had someone for that position. I was going to work on the truck until the cut and wrap was finished. And then I was going to manage the cut and wrap. And then, they were also going to build a smokehouse that someone else was going to run. Well, that person who was running the mobile unit had a bad knock. To set the scene, the holding pin for this animal was a 20 by 20 pin on a concrete slab. And of course there's no head restraint because it's just a pin. This is a hot steer. Came in not wanting, we just separated them from the herd in the barns, got him over to this isolation pin, passed anti-mortem inspection, and the guy running the show lined up with his 22 mag, and the animal was, moving its head. And I want to say, like, I told him, don't take the shot, like, the animal's too hot. I didn't. In hindsight, that would have made me look better telling that story, but that's not what I thought. That's not what was even going through my head. My head was just like, let's get this going. A lot of people would say, like, I wouldn't have taken that shot. Well, I don't know, honestly, what I would have been doing in that situation. I know I'm always uncomfortable taking shots like that in front of the USDA. Since that incident, it was like one of those incidents. I would never take a shot like that in front of the USDA from the events I'm about to tell you. Iron sights at most 20 feet away, at best 10 feet away. Not in a pose position, he was able to lean on a post, so he didn't have to deal with shakiness or the little micro spasms you get right before you pull the trigger. But in any case, what happened is it missed. It was way too high. And the animal turned its head around. And we thought it was irritated before. It was stomping. It was doing this. It just couldn't. It fazed him in the sense that it pissed him off. It wasn't vocal. He was stomping and like ramming the fence and stuff. But it didn't even daze him. And the correction is where the fuck up happens. Because it took at least a minute for him to take a second shot. And that 20 by 20 pin might as well be a mile long now. It's like when you do something, like, I don't know what, like, playing basketball with your friends or something. And someone says, don't choke. You don't choke because that person says that. You choke because that's all you think about. And all that person could think about is how he just fucked up. And that's where the choking comes in. That's where he's like, ugh, ugh. And his second shot missed. It hit the animal. Didn't get in that sweet spot. And this just turned into a nightmare. The USDA is there. The animal slamming up against the pins. Going apeshit. This guy is broken. I could see in his face that he didn't want this. Nobody wanted this. It's a terrible, unfortunate situation. But it's not like you have to deal with it. It's not like drawing or typing where you make a mistake, you could just walk away and come back, or doing a puzzle. It's like you need to deal with it as quickly as possible. It's not something you could get a case of the fuck it's on. Lined up, took a deep breath, pulled the trigger, and missed the spot again. And I was like, fuck. The USDA, and I quote, says, I'm going to have to shut you guys down. And the animal's still alive. Right now, we're about 5 minutes from the first knock until the third knock. And he said, I was going to give you, this one if you could drop it, but now I have to write this up. And he could have wrote it up after the first knock didn't go through. He was using his discretion, because there are flukes and everything like that. And that 5 minutes turned into 6 minutes. Turned into 7 minutes and 8 minutes. And all said and done, that turned into the 15 longest minutes of my career. When the fourth shot dropped the animal and he ran up and just unloaded the clip into its head. The next day I was promoted to knocker and running the kill truck. That worker was no longer there. It had been 3 years since I killed an animal in front of the USDA. Up until that day. I hadn't shot anything until Vermont. And I was only used to using a captive bolt. And when you have a humane handling issue like the one I just described, you're shut down and you have a couple days to respond and ensure how this is not going to happen again. So my response was to buy a head shoot, which they're very inexpensive, $10,000. Unexpected to, spending. And to use a captive bolt and then a 22 mag as a backup, because a captive bolt is what I was used to. And the reason you don't want another captive bolt as a backup, or at least I didn't, because in a head shoot, if you miss, it's going to buck and it's going to hard to get that captive bolt. in that sweet spot off the head. Yeah, so he was let go. He was relieved of his duties. Another part of the corrective action was firing him. Recently, I was given a talk at the Focus on Farming in King County, Washington, at the Evergreen State Fairgrounds. I was invited by Linda Knutson, the woman I mentioned previous on how that amazing contact, that once in a lifetime contact. She runs this yearly workshop and that helps farmers like, this is what you need. And I gave this talk, and that's going to be an episode in the future. I recorded the whole thing. Really pleased with how it turned out. But one of the questions was, someone asked, what are the consequences of bad butchering? And, I said, bad butchering could get you arrested if you are egregious, inhumane. I don't know if they're expecting like, oh, it's going to taste bad, or your yield's going to suck, or the animal's going to run hot, or but I just said, you have paperwork that needs to be filled out with butchery. You have accountability. You have temperatures that need to be required in this meat industry. And another consequence is losing your job, That's an extreme example, but that guy he choked. On any other day, he could make that shot, but something happened. And I was going to make sure it never happened to me to that degree and cut that head shoot. Being new to Washington and now needing an employee, my wife decided to join me on the mobile slaughter unit. I met my wife working retail. She was working the counter. My wife knows how to cut and break down pigs, and knows how to cut steaks and run a bandsaw. And now she was learning how to slaughter. She'd run out, corral an animal, kill it, slit its throat. I would do all the heavy lifting, and she didn't like the gutting. She was also in charge of orders and all the inventory and financial sides of that business. Big ideas are expensive. And when you start realizing the cost of them, that's when you're like, let's not do that. Or I guess, I don't know what I'm trying to say elegantly. The owner of this company, we had this big idea that we're going to have this cut and wrap facility, smoke shop, and we're going to build this brand new facility on the farm. And we drew CAD drawings, and they were supposed to, any day we were going to break ground. We got the 3-phase from the road to the job site. We had the crew all lined up and contractors. And just like that, my boss lost his job of working for the NFL. He started evaluating the cost. And this huge multi-thousand square foot smokehouse was moved to no smokehouses into a gutted dairy where it was going to be temporary. But we got it up and running. We got it through the inspection period, the USDA knowing that it was going to be a temporary solution until, we were back on track. Many people take a season off. But me and my wife couldn't do the workload alone. So I needed a worker. Someone to run the slaughter truck while I ran the cut and wrap facility. So I put a call into the ether being Instagram, that I needed an employee. And like a hero in the night, I met David.
Hey gang, David here. was thinking back about a couple of years ago when Travis and I were discussing the possibilities for this podcast related to the meat industry in general. I was pretty excited to work on the project, but I was also a couple of weeks away from moving completely across the country to start a new life. Ranching sheep, butchering, running a plant out in the Midwest, with hopes of being 100% self-employed relatively soon. So I kind of had a lot on my plate at the time, and was just sort of entertaining the idea of the podcast. After a couple, I guess, intense years of nonstop work, the only thing at this point that remains the same from that time is the podcast. I've since moved back to the West Coast, started a new life out here, and I'm in an area where I know absolutely nobody. It's super sparsely populated. Everything's totally different, but the podcast is still here. And even when things back in the Midwest weren't going so well, or I just was so pressed for time, I couldn't work on it. The show kept going. It's been a constant thing in my life, and developing that sort of relationship to the show itself has really contributed to the way I'm present from week to week, I guess, in my personal life and on the show, At this point, the show feels super personal to me, really quite personal. I'd say I'm a pretty transparent fella for the most part, and I wear my heart on my sleeve to my detriment sometimes, as you well know if you know me in my daily life. That being said, I'm really very introverted, and external communication with other people really erodes my mental equilibrium throughout, without any sort of proper alone time. It's a balancing act for me, I'd say. Too much extroversion really exhausts me. Too much solitude, and I can easily go down the rabbit hole, and all of a sudden I've got a hermit's routine, and I never even notice. The show really balances those two forces for me, the external and the internal, because it's I've got this unique opportunity to be able to talk to a group of peers without actually having to see any of your faces. I can go away whenever I want. It's great. I know I've been a little bit absent lately from the show, but that's mainly been due to my move. I was recently contacted by a recruiter, and 4 weeks later, my life is totally different. So I've had to take a little bit of a leave of absence, and thanks to Travis and Ryan for picking up the slack. It hasn't been a particularly easy transition. I had to say goodbye to a plant and a family that I worked for who, I felt very close to. I had to say goodbye to a crew that felt like my family. Had to kind of step out of a community that I've been working closely with as far as facilitating the procurement of good food in an area that otherwise has a really difficult time with that. I had to let go of and liquidate any equity that I had of the farm, as well as establish a plan for my flock. I wasn't able to bring those with me out west. So I sold the breed stock that I could. I slaughtered, cut, and delivered this year's lamb crop, and passed on the knowledge that I could to the person that's taking over. In the midst of all this, the show kind of had to take a back seat, and I had to step away for a little bit, during that particularly reflective month. However, I was able to really take a look at my values, needs, wants, wishes, and workaholism, I guess. Now that I'm settled into this new place, which, as I mentioned, is scenically beautiful, sparsely populated. It's an introvert's paradise, really. I don't have any farm chores. I don't have any livestock. No social structure, etc. I'm able to kind of clearly move forward with fresh eyes and intentions for how I'd like to spend my time on my own terms. And the show remains steady as it always is. And I'm super grateful for that. As a matter of fact, this show has really taught me a lot about myself. When we first started the show, I still harbored some really boneheaded ideas about the difference between a butcher and a meat cutter. And because of the show, the people I've met, I've talked to, I've debated with, I've learned so much about unconscious judgment and compassion. We've all had different experiences in this trade that's led us, to this moment that we each occupy individually, I guess. But we've shared the fact that we're like on a path and a similar one. Full of all kinds of different challenges that are somehow super relatable to one another. I find it insanely comforting, actually, to know that other humans in the same business, no less, experience some of the same struggles as I do. Perfectionism, workaholism, feeling like an imposter from time to time, feeling like maybe you're never going to be the best, or is that even important? Things like this. We all experience these thoughts in one form or another from time to time. And we also share the good times, the satisfaction over knowledge and skill acquisition, the satisfaction from sharing knowledge and skill with younger people, hard physical work and the rush that you get from it, connecting with your local community over food, which is something that everybody has in common, everybody's passionate about to a degree. Celebrating just a banger of a recipe, something that's really unforgettable. A smooth holiday season, for instance. Maybe some negative pathogen test results. These are all things that we can agree are triumphs in this weird industry that we share, regardless of what cog in the machine we are. These connections are the foundation for our small community of food service professionals and enthusiasts. You don't have to work in the field just to enjoy the show or get some information from the multitude of people that we've been able to bring on. So many of our guests and co-hosts and various people that have come on that we've been able to interview just are wells of knowledge that I think are completely and totally invaluable. This is access. I've got access to knowledge and information that I never would otherwise. It probably would have taken me a decade or more to acquire the information and connections that I have from the last 1.5 years through the show. For the most part, we've been able to avoid a lot of the stereotypical machismo bullshit that comes with the territory in this job. And that's been able to allow us to make room for genuine curiosity and discussion over different topics, I think. There's a super strong enthusiasm for sharing knowledge throughout the group. It's probably why I don't even feel like I need hope for this industry at this point. I just know without question that the meat trade will always be able to evolve with people and people's tastes. We'll always be able to carve out a little niche somewhere based on our styles of learning and teaching, as professionals or business owners or apprentices or just enthusiasts or at-home butchers, I'm really proud of any part that this show can play in supporting somebody on their path, because the show has supported me on my path as well as a lot of the people that are connected with it. I'd say that the Meat Block has also, played a part in some improvement in some other areas of my personal life. The most impactful way it's helped me has been with my relationship to being creative. I've always had a hard time with things like that, Oftentimes, there's two roadblocks that I have when it comes to being creative, and both of which in conjunction stops my creative process dead in its tracks. The first is concentration. I'm a pretty high-strung fella. I always have been. Meditation and mindfulness are non-negotiable practices for me. I have to employ them in order to have a manageable life. It's just what it is. I realized that a few years ago, and although I'm not 100% perfect at keeping it up, I'm 100% perfect at remembering that I need to start again when I stop. It's not easy for me, because I'm easily distracted. My attention deficiencies can be quite strong when I'm not working at a fast pace doing manual labor. That's when I can really, really focus. It's taken several months, maybe a couple of years, but I've made marked improvements, and much of that has to do with writing episodes, I think. And believe it or not, a single 20-minute segment of this show could take me hours or even a couple of days to put together, depending. Being able to sit and concentrate through a whole episode, it was really grueling at first, and I would get up and do other things and go out and do chores or like check on the animals or check on the grass or whatever it was, when I first started. But now it's gotten so much easier for me, and I can sit and finish a project all the way through. The second roadblock I have in the creative process is self-consciousness. It's closely related to perfectionism or vice versa, and both are, forms of fear, really. As the years have gone on, though, working with Travis and Ryan, I've become a lot more comfortable with unapologetically being myself, and that includes being okay with being wrong, which I am all the fucking time. Those two jerks are exactly as they seem all the time, and it's great. What you hear is what you get. That's Travis and that's Ryan, as far as I know them, and I really appreciate their honesty and candor on the show. Like I said, being myself includes being wrong on the show sometimes, and being wrong helps me acquire more knowledge and more tools, and because there's always somebody from the meathead community that is there to provide correct information in like a nice way, not in like a a douchebag way. It's like a more interactive Wikipedia, and sometimes it feels like the experience of doing my best and being okay with it has really opened up the rest of my creative projects. Mainly playing music. I've always had a really complex relationship to being creative due to those two things, and working through them with the show has been a huge hidden bonus to me in my personal life, and I've been able to kind of jumpstart some things that have been on the back burner for a long time. Last but not least, the friendships that I've made, I never would have otherwise, honestly. Recently, while I was in Washington, I got to spend a morning with Travis and his family, as well as Ryan and his family. And we were all having brunch at Travis's place, and it was just mind-blowing to me that these three super different people with different journeys and different families and different everything, we're sitting here chewing the fat on a Saturday morning, thousands of miles from our individual birthplaces. These two guys are a pair of the hardest working, realest people I've had the good fortune of knowing, and hope to know them for a while, I've also very gratefully been welcomed into a small group of friends, almost kind of like a support group or sandlot baseball team of diverse characters from all over the globe that all have one thing in common, and that's the meat business. I look up to and respect all of them, and they're people who will always give it to me straight and honest. People with twice the experience I have, but I'd be eager to work with any one of them. A full 12-hour shift anytime, on a cradle or in a cut shop, no problem. I've got nothing but respect and love for all of them and everybody in the meat block community in general. And that little group of friends, we'll call them the wee dots. Anyways, I could wax nostalgic about this pretty much all day, but I'll save that for another show. And here's to 100 more episodes. Here's to 100 more years of butchery.
Well, meatheads, it's been a blast. 100 episodes deep. This weekend here, as I record this, I am sick. I'm not feeling good, but that's all right. I wanted to make sure to at least put a little bit forward here for this 100th episode. I started contributing somewhere around the 19th episode. This is Ryan here. Ryan O'Hearn at Gather and Break. Around the 19th episode, I started contributing. Around that time, a little bit before that time, I visited Travis's recording studio at his house. And Travis interviewed me. I think he interviewed me twice, actually. It did not go very well. Not his fault. Totally my fault. I could barely string together any sort of cohesive thought during those interviews. I remember heading back home, and in the subsequent days, I remember thinking, man, I did not represent myself very well in that interview. I bet I can do better than that. So I was motivated to try to represent myself better. And I sat down and typed out that first piece that ended up airing on episode 19. I sat down at the computer and it just poured right out. The whole thing just poured right out. I read it the following weekend at Travis's house, and when he heard it, he was like, yep, that's what I want you to do. Do more contributions like that. So from then on, every week from then on, Travis would send me topics for me and David to write about, and I just kept writing and kept recording. One of the early things I noticed after I got over some of my anxiety and apprehension and uncomfortability about recording my voice, after I got over that stuff, I started to notice that it felt really good to share. It felt really good to pour my thoughts out and to have some amount of audience to be speaking to. It felt good to have someone ask me their opinion in the first place, which is essentially what a writing prompt was, or a topic was. It's like Travis or David saying, Ryan, I want you to write about this thing, and so that felt good to have someone even ask me for my opinion. And then frankly, from that point forth, I was surprised to find that I've had so much to say about this stuff. I thought I'd be one and done with my segment on episode 19. I really didn't have much of an idea that I would be contributing over the long term. But here I am, still pulling more handkerchiefs out of the magician's hat. And it's like, more than a year later. I share a little on Instagram. I share a little in conversation with my coworkers and my colleagues. But I've found that podcasting is a medium that allows me to go much deeper. It's a great format for exploring very complex topics. The deeper I went, the more compelling it became to explore these subjects further, and the more people I felt compelled to bring into the conversation. Contributing to this podcast became a great pressure release valve for me. I suddenly found an outlet for my thoughts, an arena where I could work through my experiences at the same time involve an audience in my process. My hope was that someone somewhere would benefit from my ideas and ruminations. My hope was that I was, at the very least, offering something of value to someone somewhere. Without this intention to bring a meaningful, valuable contribution to the community, without that intention, I wouldn't have been able to sustain any of my efforts. At least I was trying, and that was a good feeling for me. At least I was trying to bring something meaningful forward. Even if I didn't hit the mark all the time, or even if I wasn't always very successful at it, at least I was trying. And that felt good to me, to just try. There's always a possibility that people wouldn't like what I was saying. And, I got over that, and it just, in the end, it just has felt good to at least bring forward my best effort. And that's really all you can do at the end of the day. As time has gone on, the interviews and the recorded conversations I do with butchers and farmers have become more of my primary focus. I found I really, really like bringing other people's voices and opinions forward. There are so many people who I respect in this industry, people I've met and worked with, and also people I haven't met, but I'm familiar with their work. And to be able to show honor to them through the podcast format is the most satisfying aspect of this whole deal for me from what I've found. To be able to facilitate the opportunity for these people to bring their stories forward is super, super rewarding. The vast majority of the butchers, slaughtermen, farmers I've met and worked alongside do not have a social media presence and do not share their opinions really beyond their immediate local community. Yet many of these people have such a great deal to offer and a great deal to contribute to the larger conversation that's occurring. So it's become a great joy for me to help bring their voices forward through an interview and thereby allow the world to glimpse their brilliance. The more podcasting I do, the more bored I get hearing and listening to my own voice. But I continue to enjoy hearing the diverse opinions and perspectives of my peers, and I continue to enjoy this podcast medium that allows us to really think and really share and foster an open-mindedness, and it's a good way for us to just plain acknowledge each other as peers and colleagues and mentors, etc. On the job, when we're working and when we're on the job, the focus is really always going to be on the job and on workflow. There are a million moving parts we need to focus on to be effective at work, and not to mention dangerous equipment that we need to focus on. So it's usually not the right environment to have in-depth conversations. It's easier to keep the conversation light while at work, partly because the interruptions are so many and so frequent. But podcasting is something else entirely. There's no limit to how deep of a well we can dig with the podcasting medium. I am indebted to Travis and David for kicking this whole thing off and for welcoming me into the fold. Without their work, this platform surely would not exist. Travis is the fuel, he's the steam engine, the driving force, the genius among us. David is the brains, the talent, and the best storyteller among us. Big respect to these guys, David and Travis. And Milo, big respect to Milo. And long live the Meat Block Podcast.
I just want to say that without you, the listener, like I never thought that the Meat Block would end up where it is, and like just for example, like when I started this podcasting as a medium, it's I viewed it as a way to express just ideas and things that I had difficulty with, of like cutting and learned experience. And then, then I thought it was going to be more of like an educational podcast, like our first few episodes, which it is. Don't get me wrong. We're very educational here at the Meat Block. I didn't know how personal it would get. I'm actually surprised sometimes. I know that when you listen to the episodes where me and David are bouncing off each other, those are some of my favorite episodes. It's unfortunate that living situations and geographically, we can't do that more often. I think we have naturally good chemistry. But what the show is now, I love. I love this idea. The whole reason I started it is just I listen to podcasts all day at work, and I listen to people talk about their lives, and I'd be so involved in listening and hearing what people were saying and their anecdotes and, learning. And I was like, I could just talk. I could do that. I'm good at talking. And those first episodes, I'm not good at talking, and I may still not be. There's a train in the background. It's pretty annoying. But anytime I hear someone say, I love your show and keep it up, it's really good, or it's great, or we listen to it at my shop when we're setting up, or when I'm getting the case ready, or, that's fucking insane to me. Because I remember setting up cases where I worked and feeling like no one's there and like I'm alone. And I felt the most alone I've ever felt in those days, working a job where I think the staff very much just outwardly didn't like me. And now I'm keeping people company while they do that. That just blows my fucking mind. And I love it. And I'm humbled by it. And I appreciate it when I online say, ask me anything and questions. And I love giving the answers. Even though that persona of me that you see is deadpanned and just monotone. It's just crazy to know that there's people listening. So this Thanksgiving, in this 100th episode, I just want to say thank you. I'm thankful for the fans. I'm thankful for just the people I've met and the stories I've heard. And I truly am looking forward to the next 100 episodes. I didn't think there would be 100 episodes of me just gabbing about stuff. It's awesome though. Thank you. And of course, if you want to support the show, all I ask is you review us on iTunes and leave 5 stars, not 4 stars. What the fuck is that? 5 stars. And if you want to get a hold of us here at the Meat Block, you can tweet us at the Meat Block Pod, even though no one does. Truly no one does. I dare you to. Contact us on the Meat Block on Instagram. Also, we have a Facebook page. If you want to get a hold of, let's say, Ryan, he is at Gather and Break on Instagram. David is a farm butcher on Instagram. And I am at American Butcher on Instagram. Our meathead of the week, that is coming back, yes, is at Lizzie Kittykins, who's out there learning the trade through apprenticeship. I wish the best of luck. And thank you for listening. And thank all of you for listening. This is what it sounded like when David and I were trying to record at the same time in the beginning.
That's interesting. So the one thing that I can't find though is, how do you say it? How do you say the toxic thing? Hold on, I can't find it. Say it again, and then we'll just.
I say nitrocetamine.
Nitrocetamine?
Yeah.
Okay. So nitrocetamine sounds like something that would cause you harm over a long period of time. You're not going to get cancer from eating 5 grams of pink salt right away. No. I'm trying to find, because I know that, for instance, when, let's say I have way too much nitrogen in my soil, right? And it's in the form of nitrate.
Yeah.
And my sheep are out there and they eat a shit ton of plants that have taken up way too much nitrogen.
Yeah.
you know, that nitrogen will bind in their cells in the spot where, what is it? It's oxygen. So the nitric oxide would bind where the regular oxygen would bind in the cells, and they'll suffocate from the inside out.
Yeah.
Is that what happens if I just downed a whole, if I made myself a salt, a really, like a 50% salt solution of pink salt and downed it, when I suffocate from the inside out? Is that the same sort of nitrogen poisoning that you would get from this, like instantly? I keep trying to find something about that.
Yeah. So,
but I can't find anything.
Well, I haven't hit record yet, so just let me know when I need. Or actually, I think I am recording. Never mind.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I don't know if you want to start the show now or just continue talking. But so
But we could just welcome everyone to our conversation.
Yeah.
Real quick, and then
your terrible clearing of your throat. All right. You know what this is. This is the Meat Block. I am Travis, and
I'm David.
Are you recording, David? You need to be recording. Let me know when you...
That is the other part of it, isn't it?
Yeah. Because that's the only way it sounds good. Let me know when you're going to record, and then we'll count down.
Hold on.